New steps to reform the criminal justice system. Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder. After months of back and forth, President Trump has lent his support to major legislation aimed at giving prison inmates a second chance. Amber Strong shows us the unique allies pushing the bill and the race against time to get it through Congress.
The movement toward criminal justice reform received a welcome and necessary boost on Wednesday.
Today, I'm thrilled to announce my support for this bipartisan bill that will make our community safer and give former inmates a second chance at life after they have served their time.
The clock is ticking on Congress's chance to make real changes to the criminal justice system. And while things couldn't be more divided here on Capitol Hill, advocates say the time to act is now. They include Kelly Paul, wife of Senator Rand Paul.
I came to this issue a little bit through my work in Kentucky, visiting various halfway houses, recovery centers like the Hope House and the Isaiah House, and realizing how pervasive our drug problem is and how we need alternatives to incarcerating people.
Paul also saw how prison life specifically affected female inmates.
People are not aware of some of the things that were going on in our prisons. First and foremost, women who were giving birth were being shackled.
For Paul, fixing the problem reaches directly to the heart of justice, right and wrong.
If you look at the numbers, that whites and blacks use drugs at the same levels, but if you look at the rates of incarceration, people of color are incarcerated at much higher rates. I'm a conservative, but I always say, big government really hurts people from all walks of life. I think a lot of times when progressives hear conservatives talk about big government, they think we're just concerned about taxes or overregulation or business or economics. But really, this is a civil rights issue.
So Mrs. Paul is doing something she says her friends aren't used to seeing, bringing her desire to right those wrongs straight to Washington. And she's not alone. The push for criminal justice reform extends far beyond the halls of Congress. Everyone from Christian advocacy groups to celebrities to the president's son-in-law, all working together for change.
Jared Kushner has been the pivotal player in this. He personally comes to this issue. His own father was incarcerated, and he has been the driving force inside of the White House in making sure that this gets done.
Former prisoners have also been instrumental in this fight, along with those who preach about second chances. 2,000 pastors signed a letter in support of Congress's latest effort. The bill, dubbed the First Step Act, calls for more opportunities to receive good time credit, better conditions for women, and incarcerating prisoners closer to families. It's been a tough decision for a president who campaigned on law and order, but support from the National Fraternal Order of Police seemed to help balance the scales.
The bill includes reasonable sentencing reforms while keeping dangerous and violent criminals off our streets.
The ball is now in the Senate's court, where advocates hope this lame duck session can lead to a second chance for prisoners and families across the nation. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Well, Brett Tolman is the former U.S. attorney from Utah, and he's been working with the Justice Action Network to gain congressional support for this criminal justice reform initiative, and he joins me now for more. Brett, thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Brett, we've reported that the critical factor in moving forward with this measure was to get law enforcement on board. Tell us about how you worked to make this happen.
Well, I spent over a decade as a federal prosecutor putting bad guys in jail. And when I was doing it, I enjoyed it. I definitely felt like I was doing some good in the community. But I also became very much aware that there were some issues and problems in the criminal justice system on the federal level. So it's from that point on I started to work with many of my law enforcement colleagues, former U.S. attorneys, former officials in the Department of Justice, and our state and local law enforcement, to get them to understand or to see that criminal justice reform can be done in a way that is actually better for public safety.
And talk about the timing a little bit, Brett. Why is it so important to get this done now?
Well, Congress moves slowly, and as we've seen, they don't get along. It's been rough. This is one of those rare instances in which you have law enforcement on the one side and conservatives on the one side, and you have progressives and compassionate leaders that are saying now's the time. If it doesn't get done now, it's really just starting over. Yeah.
What are some of the most important elements, do you think, of reform?
Well, this particular bill first focuses on the fact that 95% of all individuals that are in jail or in prison are getting out. So when they get out, are they going to commit more crime, or what are we going to do? So it incentivizes those in prison to lower their risk of recidivism through programs, training, faith-based education. All of those things are going to help so that when they get out, we're not arresting the same people over and over again.
Yeah, it equips them to
right.
face the real world. Opponents of the measure say that this could lead to higher rates of violence. What do you say to that?
It's absolutely false. If you know the federal criminal justice system and you know what's going on in this bill, you understand that that's a narrative that's being pushed by people that don't want to change, people that are stuck in the 80s and 90s and think that warehousing criminals is the way that you should conduct the criminal justice system. And it's ignoring the data. States like Texas, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina, Utah, and they have implemented changes more aggressive than what this bill does and have seen better results. In Texas, they closed 8 prisons and have saved over $4 billion while their crime rate was lower and their rate of recidivism was lower.
Brett, final question for you. What are the odds, what are the chances you think this passes?
I think it's good right now. I think 75–80% chance right now. It certainly was a big boost for the president to come out strong. And he's very clearly indicated, I want a bill on my desk and my pen's ready. And so this is the time to get it done. It's been too long in the federal system.
We'll see if it happens. Brett Tolman, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
So what is next in all of this? For that, we turn to Capitol Hill correspondent Abigail Robertson. Abigail, lawmakers up there are running out of time.
Yes. Well, the lawmakers who are really pushing for this, they want to see it passed by the end of this year. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said yesterday that he is open to bringing it to the Senate floor for a vote, but he hasn't seen the final proposal yet. That is expected to come later this afternoon, and then we will see it circulated around members. And then he says he will proceed to doing a whip count on the vote and then possibly bringing it to the Senate floor by the end of this year.
And Abby, on Capitol Hill, what kind of opposition from lawmakers are you seeing there to criminal justice reform?
Well, I just spoke to Senator Mike Lee. He's one of the biggest advocates of criminal justice reform here on the Hill. And he said that there is opposition, but that it is very small. And that's why he wants to see this bill voted on and brought to the floor, because he believes once it's voted on, it will pass and pass overwhelmingly, and that a lot of people are behind these efforts.
Yeah. Now, what's your sense, Abigail? Do you think lawmakers up there, for the most part, kind of like you just said, are pretty supportive of this? Or, we've heard about 75% chance of passing. Yes. What would you say from what you're hearing?
I do. From what I'm hearing, there is a strong feeling that this is going to pass. I think the question is, will it pass by the end of this year, or will it be pushed into the next Congress? McConnell said yesterday that his top priorities in the next 10 or so legislative days that they have left here on the Hill is funding the government and passing the Farm Bill. If he is able to do those two things without a whole lot of issues, then he said he will look at other things that they can possibly squeeze in by the end of this year, and one of those would be the criminal justice reform bill. So I think it really depends on if he's able to get the spending bills passed, get the Farm Bill passed without a whole lot of issues there, and then we might see it on the Senate floor by the end of this year, where it is looking likely that it will have strong bipartisan support.
Okay, Abigail Robertson for us on the Hill. Thank you, Abby. Well, evangelicals have played a huge part in pushing for this reform, and none more so than Pastor Paula White, who's a faith advisor to President Trump. Earlier, I spoke with her and her husband, Jonathan Cain, and here's how this whole idea of prison reform came about.
Well, what started as just a conversation. We had a dinner, 40 of us that have been friends of the president and people of faith. when he first went into office, and Jared and Ivanka were there and some of the senior advisors, it really started as a small seed. And at Jared's table, they were talking about, if every church adopted someone when they came out of prison, we could solve the recidivism rate. And of course, this was a passion of Jared. So we began to do listening sessions and research and best practices, and here we are right up to the First Step Act. And I believe that Congress, the House, will do the right thing, that they will pass this bipartisan bill, and that we will see one of the greatest wins for humanity, because we all want people's lives to be better. We all deserve a second chance. While it really is very protective, it still secures things with security, but what it does do is it gives people vocational training, faith-based programs, to be able to be housed, to be able to be educated, get the skills, continue mentoring. That reacclimation is what's so vitally important.
Well, both of you are real fixtures at the White House. You are constantly there. Jonathan, this next question for you. What does it say about this administration that it is so open and so invitational toward evangelicals and the faith community?
Well, Mr. Trump has always had a heart for God. His mother was a devout Christian. He still has the Bible that she gave him, and from the very beginning, he spoke to faith leaders before he was president, and felt very strongly that Christians needed a voice and needed to vocalize their feelings about what's going on in the world. And so I'm not surprised that promises made, promises kept here. Also, Vice President Pence and his heart, and the prayer now that we're seeing, like we were at in the treaty room, at the Indian treaty room at the Eisenhower building, many of the worship leaders all came, and pastors, to hear the fine works that this administration is doing.
And Paula, I know you posted a video, I think this might have been the same thing, where it was a room full of faith-filled believers worshiping and singing.
Worship leaders, very, Danny Goki and many others came. What can we do, and they want, it's time now. They feel like they can voice their opinions, and it's just really refreshing to see.
How often does something like that happen?
All the time. And that's what, Jenna, people get so surprised. Like, I'll never forget when we went into office and prayed over President Trump, and it went viral. And I'll say secular news media was like, what's going on? What's happening? And what was happening is everyday normal.
Wildfires and the work of the faith community in that state. In Florida, Republican candidates still lead in both the Senate and governor's races after today's big deadline for election officials to finish a machine recount. Even before today's 3 p.m. deadline, Republican Senate candidate and Florida Governor Rick Scott called upon his opponent, Senator Bill Nelson, to stop the count, tweeting, "With over 2/3 of the machine recount completed, our margin of victory has grown." Also at stake is the governor's mansion, with Republican Ron DeSantis still leading against Democratic challenger Andrew Gillum. A federal judge refused earlier requests by Democrats to suspend the deadline, even after one Florida county warned they would not submit the Palm Beach County results on time. And our chief political analyst, David Brody, joins me now. David, what a mess down in Florida. What do you make of all of this?
You took my line. What a mess. Can I repeat it, though?
What a mess.
What a mess. What a mess. Look, here's the bottom. Can I try to just boil all of this down? Rick Scott is ahead of Bill Nelson by 12,000 votes. Even if they do all of these recounts that we've heard, machine counts, hand wash, spin cycle counts, whatever, 4,000, roughly about 4,000 or 5,000 votes is what we're talking about here. So there's just really no way that Bill Nelson can win this thing at this point. And so that's kind of the bottom line of it all. Having said that, who knows in Florida where they're going to next find some votes? Who knows? It could be down at the laundromat at this point. Who knows?
Yeah, what's your sense? Was this a play for Democrats to, manufacture votes like they're being accused of?
Well, that's been the storyline, and the media's played that up, and Donald Trump has clearly played that up, so has Rick Scott. But the truth of the matter is, it's not as much fraud necessarily as it is some major incompetence down in Florida. Brenda Snipes, we know about her down in Broward County. She's had problems the last time around in 2016 with ballots, and they went not just missing, but there were all sorts of problems with those. And so the question really is more incompetence than fraud, and it just leads to this idea that fraud could be at play here, but there's really been no specific evidence other than there's been some signature issues, which we can get into when we have about 25 more minutes.
Yeah, well, both of the Republican candidates down there, Scott and DeSantis, they have the backing of President Trump, and he went down there to campaign for them. We were actually at one of those campaign rallies. What's your sense? Was that helpful to them? Do you think it ultimately will make the difference?
Yeah, I think it will ultimately make the difference, and it did make the difference at the time. There's no doubt about it. We saw the electricity. We saw the crowd.
Unreal.
Yeah, it really was. And so, sure, you can easily make the case that if Donald Trump didn't go down there, and let's be honest, we were at one rally, but he was down there at least 2 or 3 times that week, and before that, I think a few other times. So I think it was 5 or 6 times. So yes. Did he make the difference? Well, when you have 12,000 votes separating Bill Nelson and Rick Scott, Donald Trump is worth more than 12,000 votes for sure, and Rick Scott can be thanking his lucky Donald Trump stars.
And moving forward, David, do you think Florida has learned its lesson here? I say that with hesitation because we all are remembering 2000, and here we are again. But do you think they've learned their lesson this time?
No, they haven't. And I got to tell you, here we go, 2020. What's going to happen down there? It's going to be tight in Florida yet again. There is talk about getting rid of the Broward County election supervisor down there. Jeb Bush even tweeting out this afternoon it's time for her to go. Well, I mean, you could have tweeted that out 2 years ago. And so as Florida turns, so goes the nation. I don't know what else I want to say, but it's Florida.
What a mess.
What a mess. Marsha.
That sums it up. All right, David, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, the wildfires in California are now the deadliest in the state's last 100 years. At least 56 people are dead and 130 people are still missing. Caitlin Burke reports.
It's the deadliest fire in the modern era, and it's not done yet. The Camp Fire raging in Northern California is only 35% contained, and the search for its victims is so vast that the number of crews increases by the day.
It's too soon. 56 years old. She had a lot more to give.
The Butte County town of Paradise, California seems to be the ground zero of this fire. Nearly 9,000 homes there destroyed, and a majority of the fire's victims and missing reportedly called Paradise home.
There are potentially over 100 people that were killed in Butte, potentially.
Yeah, this is so devastating that I don't really have the words to describe it. It looks like a war zone. It is. It's the devastation that only fires of this kind could bring about. Nobody's really expecting it, but it happens.
CBN's Operation Blessing is in California, connecting with churches there and determining what needs can be met. They plan to get disaster relief supplies into the area as soon as possible. Meanwhile, a grim warning from authorities. The death toll from the Camp Fire has the potential to double. They tell residents that they won't be allowed back into their neighborhoods until the search for the missing is over. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Still ahead, one prisoner's relationship with the judge who put him behind bars. It creates a hope-filled legacy in one Texas town. Texas leads the nation in fighting crime and actually putting fewer people behind bars. This turnaround comes as a result from its lock 'em up mentality to one of rehabilitation. John Jessup shows us one extraordinary example of how it's changing those on both sides of the system.
All rise.
As a former police officer, prosecutor, and judge, Robert Newsom would appear to typify Texas law and order. When he judges cases, however, Newsom follows 2 other principles: justice and compassion.
So my judicial philosophy is, yes, I believe in the law, I promote the law, I'll stand with the law. But on the other hand, there's a place for mercy built into our law.
Sulphur Springs boasts this picture-perfect town square, but like most stories, life has many twists and turns. One such turn began 20 years ago when Judge Newsom met a young man in his courthouse who was on the wrong side of the law.
Well, this is the courtroom where I was sentenced to 5 99-year sentences.
Ron Atkins fell into a life of crime at 14. After a string of burglaries, a jury hammered him with almost 500 years in prison. At 22 and with no hope of ever leaving lockdown, Ron lashed out.
So I set about making a reputation for myself, making a life for myself in the prison. And I became really violent.
He joined a prison gang, fought inmates and staff, and racked up 250 prison violations. That put him in solitary, where he would eventually spend 13 years. Alone and suicidal, he says he turned to God and a worn-out Bible.
Half the pages were missing because I've been using it for rolling papers. I've been smoking cigarettes with Bible paper. All that was left of the Bible was the New Testament.
Ron learned about grace, forgiveness, and God's love, so he left the gang for a Bible study. In 2012, Ron experienced his first miracle, a surprise review that resulted in parole more than 80 years before his projected release in 2095.
I didn't even think it was real until I actually got out of the gate.
Once out of prison, he found work and also began sharing his story at churches and conferences.
Father God, Lord, I love you and I thank you.
That's how he met his wife, also a former felon, and now an ordained minister and a licensed Christian counselor. Then, one day while sitting in church, he ran into someone from his past.
It dawned on me. I told the pastor, I said, you know what, I think that's the judge who sentenced me to 5 99-year sentences. He's like, no, I don't think so.
Afterwards, I went up to Ron.
He came up to me and he was like,
I said, are we okay?
You know, I just felt my heart go out to him, you know.
And he grabbed me and hugged me, you know, real big.
It was good.
Burying their past, the judge and the man he put away forged a future based on faith.
I never did go to prison. I never did do some of the things that Ron has done, but I'm a sinner saved by grace, just like Ron is. We're brothers. We're brothers.
This new relationship includes getting together each week at Judge Newsom's home.
Come on in, everybody.
Where neighbors, family, and other former convicts spend time together singing and praying.
To go in the judge's living room and have them treat me just like one of the family, you know, it was just really awesome. And God's just developed a relationship where him and his wife, they're like mama and papa to me, you know.
And the ripple effect of this unlikely story expands much further into the community.
Not long after Ron stepped out of prison, he returned to the place where he was once jailed to share a message of freedom to men searching for hope and purpose.
Don't ever discount anything with God, because once He's in your life, He's working through every detail, man.
In the room next door, his wife Dawn shares her story with the women in jail. Ron's relationship with Judge Newsom opened the door for him to reach others who identify with his story. They cling to his every word, eager to experience the spiritual freedom he proclaims.
Let's give it all to God, and let's get set free. Let's get some forgiveness in your heart. You know what's in their lives, Lord. I just pray you reveal it to them, God.
While critics question the merits of faith-based prison programs, Sheriff Tatum tells CBN News this one makes a difference. Through Ron and Don's ministry, inmates and even some staff have been baptized. According to Judge Newsom, it sparked a mini revival in the county. Ron believes this new chapter is evidence of God rewriting his past to create a lasting legacy.
In the very place where I was sentenced to die in prison, He was going to use us to bring dead things back to life. And that's what He's doing. In the jail, in the worship nights, in the prayer meetings, He's just bringing dead things alive.
John Jessup, CBN News, in Sulphur Springs, Texas.
And that is going to do it for this Faith Nation. We'll see you right back here again tomorrow. Have a great evening.